when people start to recognize where their need for control is having very detrimental effects on their well-being, they often approach it by trying to get rid of their need for control. And so the focus is on resisting the need for control, and the focus is also on control. But we know that whatever we resist persists. And therefore, if we only focus on the need for control and control in and of itself without putting it into a broader context, the amount of control that we are going to experience in our lives is only going to magnify. Control is actually an interference with life force energy wanting to express itself. Control exists because of a fear of pure divine life force energy expressing itself. Because in the past, this can be in our past or in our ancestors' past or something that is happening in the world, the fear of life force energy expressing itself would have negative consequences. And therefore, we want to control life force energy in and of itself in order to prevent those negative consequences from happening. For example, long ago, when humans became sedentary and the concept of property rights came into existence, the natural expression of feminine sexual energy would bring about conflict because all of a sudden it started to matter whose kids were living on a particular plot of land because of inheritance. And therefore, humanity has this long history of controlling female sexual energy because the expression of it would bring about negative consequences. But to come back to my first point, we tend to focus on the control structures in and of themselves, instead of also looking at what life force energy did we not allow to express itself. Another example is there is a lot of resistance against how controlling Western society is becoming. But if we just look at the control structures in and of themselves and not simultaneously also dare to look the life force energy that is not being allowed to express in the eye, we are just going to end up with more control. When we are excessively focusing upon control structures within society, we are simultaneously refusing to focus upon the expression of our divine nature. Or we are refusing to even acknowledge the existence of our divine nature. Because every time we say, this is control, I don't like this, we are focusing upon not expressing what is being controlled. So it is a dichotomy that we need to hold, because if we want to express ourselves freely, we have to acknowledge our divine nature and, our true authentic selves. But at the same time, these control structures are there. One individual cannot do anything about it. So it is about acknowledging the divine nature that wants to be expressed and simultaneously also seeing how we might have to make certain detours because there are certain objects in the way, which are the control structures that we face within our external reality. So then when we look at the world today and when people want to make the world a better place, and obviously that would involve giving humanity their freedom back, people look at problems that are related to excessive control structures and they think, oh, we have to remove control and that will give humans their freedom back. That would allow humans to express their divine nature again. But the incarnation that we are living here is not just about our divine nature, which is obviously who we truly are, but we also chose to come into this specific incarnation with the history of these control structures building up. So that means that we are both. We are both our divine nature, but we are also our past. And that means our individual past, but also our collective past and the past of our ancestors. And so in order to express our divine nature in this world, within this context of having a certain past, we have to look at what is, namely a lot of control in this world, has sprouted from the fear of expressing our divine nature in some way. And with control, I do not just mean the obvious, for example, political control structures or the way that our financial system works, but I also mean a lot of the behaviors that humans do are about trying to control a certain outcome. Like, for example, when someone does a job that they hate, but they refuse to take the leap of faith to step into a career that would be more in alignment for them. It's also about control. Every way in which humans cap themselves is about control. It's about keeping the status quo. Not because the status quo is preferred, but it's because we are afraid of something happening if we let go and if we allow to embody what our soul wants to bring through us. That means that we have to go back to look at what negative consequences were once associated with the expression of our divine true nature. So yeah, when people think of control, they often think of, really consciously and very overtly controlling something. And there are certain disorders, mental disorders, that are related to that. But I would say that that is the second derivative of control, because those specific compulsions to control something are actually sprouting from a need for control because we feel out of control. But control in and of itself is just about manipulating the natural flow of life force energy that wants to come through us. That is, I would say, the first derivative of control. And when that then doesn't work, we go and create these compulsions. So, for example, the political control structures are compulsive in nature. They are not about wanting to directly control individuals' life force energy, because overarching organizations like, for example, governments, they do not have the power to control every individual's life force energy. And that then makes them feel out of control. And therefore, they have this compulsion to control. And that's where it becomes very ugly, because in order to execute a compulsion to control a large group of people, you first have to actually gaslight people to make a ground zero where people's minds are at, and then from that point you can control them, which has also been done through religion in the past, for example. So when people wake up and they start to walk the path of consciousness or the path of enlightenment, it's like this primordial life force energy that wants to come through them is being awakened. And the way that I see it is that it starts to bump up against all these control structures, and first degree control structures in how we, hold ourselves back, but also second degree control structures in how we are being gaslit by our environment and how we gaslight ourselves and therefore are being compulsively controlled, or how we compulsively control ourselves. And that is why an awakening, it's like you bump up against all these illusions that are put in place that want to control your life force energy from flowing. That's why people who have an awakening through, what life offers them, or when it is, induced by some plant medicine or breathing technique or Kundalini awakening, they start to bump up against all these illusions that keep their life force energy from flowing. And that is how they often start to walk this path of healing, path of trauma integration. And it is normal that when people awaken, they are faced with a lot of anger as well, because when we try to control our life force energy from flowing, it's like because our soul is coming through our biological body, the way that our physical body responds to a restriction or a control of the expression of our life force energy, we want to push it. And that's where we become angry. That's where anger comes into play. So anger is nothing bad. It's just it's kind of like our physical body is on our side to push the free expression of our soul's energy in this physical reality. But yeah, of course, anger is so demonized within humanity's consciousness. But so what I wanted to say is that when you are experiencing an awakening, it's very normal that you also are faced with a lot of anger, because every time you bump up against an illusionary control structure, your body will show you that response that it has to its life force energy being restricted from flowing through in this physical reality. So that's, I feel, a way healthier way to look at anger than I have to transcend this anger so that I can be this perfectly enlightened person. That's not what it's about. Anger is it's your body being on your side when it comes to your soul's desire to let its light shine through in this reality. So that was a little bit of nuance on how control is often being viewed by people. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you found it interesting. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. If you are struggling with control, or if you want to explore your own control mechanisms a little bit further and you want some coaching and guidance along the way, please do not hesitate to drop me an email. You can find my email in the description, and I'll hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.